Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this mermaid themed cake, so let's get right into it. I'm starting out with two 6-inch round cakes that I've cut in half, and I'm going to be filling those with some Swiss meringue buttercream using my small offset spatula. I'm making sure that my layers are nice and even, and then once my cake is stacked up, I'm going to apply a thin coat of my buttercream all around the outside to act as a crumb coat, and I'm going to put that in the fridge for about 25 minutes to set up. Once I could touch the buttercream and none of it came off on my finger, I knew that it was ready for the final ice. So starting with the top of my cake, I added a nice amount of buttercream, and then using my spatula and my turntable, I'm just going to smooth out the top until it's nice and level. I added a thick layer of buttercream all around my cake, and then I'm using my bench scraper to go along the sides and smooth them out. For all of the buttercream that accumulated on the edge of my cake, I'm just taking my small offset spatula again, keeping it level and dragging the buttercream into the middle. My cake is going to go back in the fridge, and next I'm going to start on my fondant. I'm rolling out some white fondant on my cornstarch work surface, and I'm going for about 1/8 of an inch thick. Once that's ready to go, I'm picking it up with my fondant roller and draping it over my chilled cake. And then I'm just working quickly to use my hands and my fondant smoother to push all the air out from the top of the cake, and then just smoothing down the sides, pulling out the skirt and all the pleats until I reach the bottom. I went over the whole thing one more time with my fondant smoother, and then for the excess at the bottom, I just used my pizza cutter to cut that away. My cake is going to be 2 tiers, so I want to add some supports. I have some straws here that I'm spacing out evenly, and then I'm going to cut those so that they are flush with the cake. I added a schmear of buttercream to help my top tier adhere better, and I have a 4-inch tier that I buttercreamed and covered in fondant the exact same way I did my base. And I'm just going to quickly lift that up and place it on top. My cake is chilled, which is why I can handle it with my hands, but if you're not sure about it, you can just use a cake lifter. Now for the fun part, I get to move on to the decorations. So I've rolled out some teal fondant, and then using my cutter, I'm cutting out a bunch of circles, which are going to be my scales. I repeated this exact same process with some light purple fondant and some golden yellow fondant. For the purple and teal scales, I wanted them to pop a little more. You can see the colors are a little bit flat. You don't have to do this, but I just like the way it looked, so I added some teal and purple food coloring gel that I mixed with a little bit of food grade alcohol, and I'm just going to stipple that over my scales. Some of them I did it a little lighter, some of them I did darker, just to give it a little variance. With the yellow scales, I'm going to dry dust them with some Rolcom Super Gold Luster Dust, and I've added a little bit of shortening to each scale before I brushed it on, because I find that it does help the luster dust stick and it coats it more evenly. To apply my scales to my cake, I'm using a little bit of shortening to help them stick, and for the very bottom layer, I've just cut my scales in half, and I'm applying them like little half moons all the way around. There did end up being a gap where I couldn't fit another scale, and I didn't like the way it looked when I overlapped it. So I'm just going to start every line here and end every line here, so that if there is a gap, they're going to all be in the same place, and this will be the back of my cake. I did end up covering a lot of the gaps with other scales, so it all worked out, but this is the best route if you don't want to have random gaps all around the cake. For my next row, I want to place my scale about halfway down over the seam of the 2 below it, if that makes sense. I don't want the sides of my scales to overlap, so I'm just keeping them so that they're just touching one another. There's no rhyme or reason to the color pattern. I put down 3 purple ones and a teal, 2 teals and a gold. You just want to make sure that you mix it up and you kind of sprinkle the gold ones throughout. I wanted to have them nicely spread out, not too close together. So this is how it looked when it's done. You can see I ended off with a full scale on the top. If you don't like the way that looks, you could trim it down, or you could also add a half scale to cover that white gap, but I didn't mind the way it looked, so I just left it like this. For the top tier, I took more of my teal and purple food coloring gel that I had mixed with my food grade alcohol, and I used my paintbrush to stipple that on, just kind of blotchy, and then I used a piece of clean paper towel just to pat it down. And I did this all the way around so that there was blue and purple, and they alternated and they weren't really touching, just so it kind of gave it like a mottled watercolored effect. I did my first layer really light, and then once that had dried down, I went over it again using a darker color of the purple and the teal just to give it a little more texture. I wanted to add some shells to my cake, so I made a template for this larger shell, and I will link the one that I used down below, and I just cut that out of some white fondant using my X-Acto knife, and I went over the divots in the shell using my fondant tool. For the smaller shells, I have this little mold, and again I will link the one that I used below. So you just press fondant into each cavity and then place it in the freezer for like 10 minutes, and they should pop out really easily. I decided to paint on my gold luster dust versus the dry dust just to show you what it looks like. I added some food grade alcohol until it was a thicker consistency. You don't want it to be too runny because then it's going to be really patchy and you'll have to add more than one coat. It turns out really nice as well, and I find that it's a little bit shinier, so this gives the shells a little bit of a different look than the scales. While those dry, I'm going to make my mermaid tail. So I have yet another template that I will link below, and I'm cutting that out of some teal fondant using my X-Acto knife. And for the top of the tail, I'm going over it with my fondant tool to rough it up a bit and make it look not so neat. I'm just adding a ton of lines over and over again. For the scales, I'm using the end of a piping tip and just pressing in half of it so I have little crescent moons going all the way down. To make it so I can add my mermaid tail into my cake, I have cut out a thicker version of my template, and I am pressing a skewer into that and brushing the whole thing with, you could use water, but I just used my teal food grade alcohol mixture, and then placing the mermaid tail that I already jazzed up a little on top of that. I'm just lining up the pieces, and if anything sticks out, you can just trim it away with your X-Acto knife. To finish it off, I'm flicking some of my wet gold luster dust onto the mermaid tail and just adding a couple little splotches. For the pearls on my cake, I've grabbed some white fondant and I'm rolling those out into a bunch of different sized balls and placing those around the base of the first tier. And then I grabbed my golden shells and added them sporadically around on top of those. Using some shortening, I attached my larger shell to the front of my cake, and then I inserted my mermaid tail into the top and added more of my pearls and shells around the base of that. And this was the final look, guys. You could do whatever colors you wanted. I've done this with black and gold and teal and purple, and that look really pretty, so whatever floats your boat. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you in the next one.